Hey everyone, how's it going? It's that time of the weekend. It's the Orange and Black Insiders Bengals podcast. I am Anthony Cosenza, and I'm joined by a very special guest this week. My co-host is Rebecca Toback, the site manager for Cincy Jungle. And some of you may or may not know that Rebecca actually was one of the major brainchildren behind this show. And I'm a little ashamed that it's taken us this long to get her on the program, but we are very happy to have you on, Rebecca, and thanks for all the work that you do for the site. Great stuff. We all look up to what Cincy Jungle does and all the news that they provide. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here. Finally, it's taken some time.
Been too long. I apologize. And in case you're wondering, this show now is spanning the entire country here. Literally, this airing, because Rebecca's in New York and I'm in Southern California, so we are stretching across the country here, bringing you this show. But thanks so much for joining us this week, Rebecca, and we hope to make it more of a regular thing. And before we kind of get into some of the topics this week, we'll talk about OTA, some concerns that we have about the team. Rebecca and I are going to talk about the schedule as well. For the Bengals, and maybe predict some wins and losses, some concern areas there, some differences that we see as the calendar sits now in June as opposed to maybe March and April before the draft. But just a couple little news and notes. Keep your eye on Cincy Jungle, not only for the content of this show. This program is streamed there, but also the writers and Cincy Jungle has gotten some access recently to Marvin Lewis and AJ Green. There's some interviews coming up on the site there and some other material. I don't know if you have any comments or any other insight on that, Rebecca, that you want to share.
Yeah, we're going to be heading out to AJ Green's football camp this week, and also we're at Marvin Lewis's earlier in the week. So if you actually have any questions that you want to have us ask AJ, we can probably do that, and you can leave those in the comments here as well.
Yeah, and as you know, we broadcast this show live every episode through YouTube, and it's also streamed on Cincy Jungle. We also splice up the stuff and put it out on YouTube, on SoundCloud, on iTunes, all of that good stuff. So check us out, download it. But while you're downloading this program, also definitely check out some of that stuff that's coming up on Cincy Jungle. And as Rebecca mentioned in our live YouTube chat, for those of you who are joining us, feel free to leave a question, not only for the upcoming interviews that she referenced later in the week, but also at the end of this program, if time permits, we're gonna try and get to some fan questions about the Bengals and what's been going on so far in OTAs and all of that. So, Rebecca, you and the CJ crew have been putting up quite a bit of information and whatnot on Bengals OTAs. They've been going on for a couple of weeks now. I guess overall impressions from things you've seen, heard, read, and reported on, based on, I know this time of year it's a little tough. You know, they're in shorts and it's not huge contact drills and all that kind of good stuff. But, you know, there's still a lot to witness. Apparently, one thing that I thought was interesting that I read on Wednesday was Chris Collinsworth, the former Bengal, was at Bengals OTA sessions and had some good praise for Andy Dalton and Joe Mixon. So thoughts on that? Thoughts on maybe some other things you've seen and heard and reported on through OTAs?
Yeah, I actually think it's really great that Chris Collinsworth was at practice on Tuesday. Tuesday was the second of 4 practices this week and the only one open to the media. So it's possible that other, former Bengals and people in the area have been coming by at practice. And there's also a few intern coaches they have working with them. But I do think it's really great that the Bengals are trying to move towards embracing their former players and stars who are on the team. And maybe, to me, these guys are free to say negative things about the Bengals when they feel the need to do so. But it is great that the Bengals are taking the time to invite them to come, especially for Chris, who lives in Cincinnati, owns a business in Cincinnati, and really embracing having them. And then also, it's great to have him praising Andy Dalton and especially, in my opinion, Joe Mixon, and kind of getting a national person, even though he does have the Bengals perspective. But now, he is the majority owner of PFF. So that kind of national recognition for Mixon and some positive things to say about him is always good, in my opinion. So yeah, that was pretty good to see this week.
Yeah, and everybody at this point knows the thing with Joe Mixon, the history, all of that kind of stuff. It is good to hear Chris Collinsworth come out and actually praise him and talk just about the football aspect. Obviously, not excusing the other incident in his history, but it's good to kind of, for the time being, at least focus on that when he at least currently is staying out of trouble and hearing some good things there. There's, in terms of injuries and guys sitting out, coming back in. From what I know, Drake Kirkpatrick injured I believe his hand or his thumb in an early session. He and Andre Smith, who I think was out with an illness, came back this week to participate. So that's good news, but there still are some guys sidelined, including Tyler Eifert, and some other guys that are, kind of recovering, rehabbing, that sort of thing. Any concerns or any additional updates you have on those situations?
Well, for Kirkpatrick, he didn't get injured in practice. He just got injured in life.
Okay.
But he is, coming back. I guess he was limited this week, and he says he's not going to rush it back because there's really no need to, which I agree with. I mean, been in the NFL for going on 6 years. Like, you don't really need these OTAs to make or break your season. So it's really the best plan for him to take his time in coming back. But this week on Tuesday, A.J. McCarron was missing, so unclear exactly why that was. And then as far as the rookies go, I believe that J.J. Dialman is still recovering from his foot injury, which happened like 4 weeks into the college season. So he has not practiced at all yet. And then in addition to that, Brandon Wilson, who was the defensive back, the 6th-round pick, who they traded up for, he is also dealing with apparently a knee injury. It's unclear when that happened, but it's supposed to be minor, and he is expected to try to participate next week for minicamp, but he has been limited and on the rehab field a bunch. Those are, the main concerns. There are some other guys. I think Josh Malone didn't have a helmet on Tuesday, so unclear what his injury is. At this time of the year, the Bengals don't really need to share what anyone's injuries are, so It only really comes out if the player himself tells the media what happened to him, which for most of the rookies doesn't happen.
Yeah, and as long as you're not hearing reports of the cart was brought out on the field or something of that nature, it's kind of a little bit of a sigh of relief. And obviously, as you get into mini camps, training camps, that sort of thing, that's when you get a clearer look at some things. The 5th round, you mentioned Dialman. He just signed his rookie contract with the Bengals, so he's officially inked up, and joining a number of other Bengals rookies that have done so as well. Rebecca, there's been a lot of talk of certain concerns and certain issues with the Bengals. A lot of fans got really re-energized in the Bengals after the draft and who they brought in, the talent they got. So a lot of people thought they stole some players especially in the 3rd and 4th round. Still, there's a lot of different concerns that make people wonder if this team can get back to the playoffs. So it's kind of a broad scoped question I'm going to ask you, but if you were to say at this moment in time what your biggest concern is with the team as we finally start seeing some guys, running some drills and on the field, we see the new faces in uniform, that sort of thing. Whether it's an on the field thing, a position, coaching, off-field concerns, what's your one major concern about this team in their quest to getting back to the playoffs after not making it last year for the first time in 5 years?
Yeah, so I feel like no one wants to hear this, and I know that from the comments on Cincy Jungle that no one wants to hear this, but I feel like the number one concern is obviously the offensive line. There's just so much uncertainty there, and maybe they will come out and surprise us and be great, and, I feel like the Bengals season really hinges on that. So I know today ESPN had an article where an NFL executive anonymously said, like, the Bengals could have the scariest offense in the NFL, or their offensive line could prohibit that from happening, and it could be a nightmare. So I feel like that really is the reality. Like, it really all is up to if Jake Fisher and Cedric Ogbuehi can play well. Like, can they be starting caliber offensive tackles, or are they going to be what we saw last year, which is far from what any NFL team should be putting out there as starters? I don't think fans want to hear this, and everyone knows it, but that's really what the number one concern is. I feel like every other position, there's pretty good depth. There's no other, where it's like there's so much ability to either just make or break the team as there is there.
Yeah, I mean it's the obvious and probably the most accurate place to point to. If the Bengals end up swinging on missing on just one of those two tackles, Fisher and Abwehi, and one of them ends up being a pretty good player, the other is a failure, whoever that may be. I mean, I guess the offensive line, if they get good production out of at least one of those guys, I think things will be okay. Yeah. But again, you've got Andre Smith moving to guard. That's a kind of a new position for him. He's never played a snap there in the NFL. There's concerns with Russell Bodine after he's, had some struggles early in his career. And now, you've got two new pieces replacing, two, even though one was a guard, you've got two new guys on the line that replacing, two basically Pro Bowl type of players in Kevin Zeitler and Andrew Whitworth. So that there's a lot of reason to be concerned there. I think a lot of people would say that this season, in terms of on-field stuff, this season probably hinges on the performance of that unit. And that's kind of what you alluded to. They got to get the run game going and have some consistency there, and they got to protect Andy Dalton. To that point, there's been some stuff put out by Pro Football Focus. I guess Andy Dalton on quick post routes is the highest rated quarterback, at least last year, outdueling Tom Brady and all of that. They put some stats out like that. And, some people, since we're in the NBA Finals, some people may look at all the fun weapons the Bengals have on offense now and kind of see a little bit of a Golden State Warriors type of thing where there's weapons everywhere, but it's that core unit up front that really needs to play well. And I tend to agree with you in terms of my biggest concern, but I'm going to go just to be a little different. I'm going to go with coaching, and I'm going to go with Marvin Lewis. And there's a number of reasons that I think I'm concerned about that. Is Marvin Lewis has been a good coach, not a great one, in my opinion. And I think his record speaks to that. His regular season success relative to his lack of postseason success speaks to that. And now he's in a contract year. They seem to, even though they kind of had a year last year where they lost a lot of guys and were bringing in new faces. They brought in a bunch of new faces again this year. There seems to be a lot of improvements made, even though they are young and unproven guys. On offense, there's probably an upgrade at middle linebacker with Kevin Minter, even if it's a marginal one over Ray Maualuga. So they seem to have a lot of good players on this team. It's a matter of Marvin Lewis being able to corral that talent, letting his coaches put the proper formations and packages together to be successful, not being afraid to play the young guys as he has been inconsistent with in his history as a coach. And if the Bengals make it back to the playoffs, it's kind of the same storyline. Can he finally get over the hump? Will the team have guys healthy enough at that point of the season to get past that playoff hump? And aside from the offensive line, I think Marvin Lewis is kind of my biggest question mark, especially since he's in a contract year. And usually by now, Mike Brown would have probably signed him. Now, I haven't heard too much on it. It seems like Marvin Lewis has made a couple comments here and there. Do you have any other information on a possible extension? I've heard nothing really. And it seems as if Lewis is going to play this season out, right?
Yeah, it really does seem that way, which is surprising, but also kind of good. I mean, he's mentioned a few times that he wants to have his contract extended, which obviously, but I think it really is in the best case. It really is best for the team for him to not, because I don't think they're ever going to fire him. So it needs to be that he's just on the last year of his deal, so that if it doesn't work out, they can just part ways. There's no one to be fired. He just isn't extended. So that does seem to be, to me, the way it's going to play out. And I actually saw on ESPN today, they were showing a recap of the whole AFC North and did mention no extension expected for Marvin Lewis. So I think that still is what we're expecting. And, it's June. Usually it's the April to May period where he gets the annual extension.
Yep.
So we're kind of past that now.
Yeah, and it's usually that I always call it in what I write kind of the rental deal. You know, it's a 1-year extension, a 2-year extension, where it's kind of like, yeah, you're doing a good job, but got to see more, got to see more, got to see more. And I agree with you. I mean, I think it's long overdue that it's if it does play out to be this way, where he's going to he's going to coach in his final year of his contract without an extension. I think it's long overdue that he kind of has that prove it year, I guess, as a coach. You know, so many players go through that. I think it's a good thing for Marvin Lewis to do so as well. As I mentioned to the listeners, we've already got a couple of questions that I've seen in the YouTube chat. Keep sending those our way. We're going to try and get to those at the end. There is one I want to ask you about right now, though, Rebecca, because you mentioned the offensive line being a concern for you. Mr. Blaze 187 in the YouTube chat said Cedric Ogbuehi did not look strong enough to anchor. I'm assuming he meant last year. Do you see this changing? Now, you're definitely a social media guru, especially compared to me. And from what I do follow Cedric Ogbuehi, and from what I've seen, he's been taking some off-season workouts, not at practices, his own workouts, pretty seriously, and maybe even toning up a bit. But obviously that's a concern. Do you think that that's something that we can expect to improve based on workouts, based on things that maybe you've seen and heard?
Yeah, I really do think that the strength is something that we can expect to improve big time, especially because this is his third offseason now with the team, and the first that he's actually working during the offseason. So the first offseason recovering from an ACL tear, second offseason had a sports hernia, then broke his toe. So like this is the first year where he's actually healthy, actually working out all offseason and getting stronger. And like I feel like that's just such a big thing for him, has been not being able to do the strength training during the offseason. That's just so necessary for players, especially linemen, both offensive and defensive linemen. But I do, I'm very into his Instagrams. He has posted a lot of like really intense workouts, like him pulling people across gyms, and he's working out with like MMA trainers. So, and Jay Glazer actually who works for Fox Sports, he has like an MMA gym in LA, which Whitworth is actually also working out there. So I feel like he's in pretty good hands. And this week, I forget who it was. It either was Zampese or Paul Alexander said something to the effect of, I'm not noticing him in practice, which is better than it sounds, because especially for offensive linemen, like you notice when they mess up, you don't really notice when they don't mess up. It's kind of better to not know offensive linemen's names. So I feel like that was, kind of the first that we've really heard about how he's doing, and not noticing him really is a good thing. So
yeah, that's a great comment by Alexander. And Alexander has his criticisms from fans, playing favorites with certain players, and maybe some other guys didn't develop. I will say this. I do have a friend of mine who is a college level offensive coordinator for a football program. And he goes annually, I guess Paul Alexander puts on some sort of symposium, speaking kind of coaching symposium. And I saw this guy recently for the first time in a while, and we were talking football and all that stuff. And he said that Paul Alexander is one of the most well-respected coaches in the nation, especially for young up-and-coming coaches. This guy's goal is to, kind of maybe be a head coach at a smaller D1 school at some point. And he did note that the respect level is very high for Paul Alexander and what he does. So, we can hate on Alexander. Fans can hate on Alexander a lot. And some of the criticisms are, valid, I guess. But I mean, the national perception is that he's a great coach, and hopefully he proves that with Ogbuehi and Fisher in their development this year. As they hopefully anchor the line. But thanks for the question there. We're going to try and get to more later on. You can, as I mentioned, you can join us every week live in the YouTube chat. We throw out those links on Twitter, and when we're live, we throw those out. I think I just did again. So join us there. The stream is also on Cincy Jungle. You can leave a comment or question in the comment thread there. All of our content is on both of those platforms. We're also on SoundCloud. We're on iTunes. You can get in touch with us on Twitter at Bengals OBI. Rebecca, where can they follow you?
I'm at Rebecca _Toback.
Oh, okay. So follow her and check out all the Bengals news that she and Cincy Jungle put out as well. And there is a lot of it, so keep it glued there. And please download our content. We'd love to hear back from you. Let's transition here, Rebecca, and let's talk about the schedule. Last year, when it came to the schedule, I looked at it, and I think when you compare last year's schedule to this one, last year's was a bit more difficult in terms of strength of schedule and all of that. That concerned me. Obviously, losing Marvin Jones, Mohamed Sanu, and some other guys concerned me as well. I still kind of had the team as maybe a 9-7 wild card type of team in 2016. Obviously, they went 6-9-1 and experienced a lot of injuries and some poor performances. All of that good stuff that we all shook our heads at throughout the year. But this year's schedule seems a little easier. Now, I did, for Cincy Jungle, I did an early season, once the schedule came out, kind of did a prediction and went through the games and kind of did a little summary. And I believe what I put was, and I think mostly it was because they didn't do much in free agency in terms of additions or really even retaining some of their big guys. And so I think I had them at about an 8-9 win window again, with the increase in wins from last year being, maybe guys stay a bit healthier. Their stars stay healthier this year. Brandon LaFell is more comfortable in the offense, and obviously the draft at that point was coming up. Maybe they add some tools there. Before the draft, Rebecca, as you went through the schedule, what did you see in terms of wins and losses before the Bengals added those 11 guys in the draft?
I mean, I feel like I'm like the resident optimist here. I mean, Connor actually also very much fills that role, maybe even more so than I do. But I was pretty optimistic about, like, if you just take a look at the teams that they're playing against, I mean, the Ravens, I feel like, we can always get one, if not two. And then just like going through, I feel like there are a lot of things that played into the team's favor. So I felt like 9 wins was really possible even before the draft. And maybe that was like being a little too optimistic pre-draft, but now I feel like that has been somewhat solidified, if not extended.
Okay. And yes, you are definitely more optimistic than I am, and kudos to you. I almost feel sorry. We have an internal little chat that we use for projects on Cincy Jungle and stuff. And when I'm not a popular guy on Sundays and Mondays when I talk in that chat room, because I'm a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction guy, and sometimes my Twitter lights up. And I obviously get angry, and then 2 minutes later I'm like, oh well, I just put my foot in my mouth, so oh well. But I was kind of with you in that 8-9 win range, but again, it was, you lost a couple of guys, you didn't do much in free agency, and then all of a sudden, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, the Bengals add these guys, and there's almost this reinvigoration of not only the fan base but of the team. And you got guys like Georgia Loke on Twitter saying, these guys, even though it's on shorts, these guys can play. These rookies can play. They're fast, and that's what they wanted to bring. They wanted to get younger, faster, more athletic, and I think they definitely did that in the draft. So now we look at it. I guess we can kind of briefly go game by game, if that's okay with you, and talk about a little bit of maybe some of the games that concern you the most, all of that kind of stuff. The Bengals open at home against the Ravens, and it's the first time, gosh, in what was it, 3-4 years, I think, since they've had a home opener?
2009.
Yeah, so it's been a while. They open at home against the Ravens, and that's a team who they pre-Andy Dalton and into Andy Dalton's first couple of seasons, they kind of had a lot of back and forth, and even in Baltimore's good years, Lewis still kind of would sneak away with a win. But lately, it's really been a lot of the Bengals taking some good wins and sweeping a couple of season series. So how do you see this one playing out, the season opener at home against the Ravens?
I feel like the team is going to be super excited to come out week one and finally be at home. I mean, for some of the younger guys who have just joined the team, they don't realize that Andy Dalton and AJ Green have never played week one at home. So I feel like for them, they should be like super amped up, ready to go. The Bengals have done pretty well in week one for the last few years. I feel like they've won week one for at least the last 3 years in a row, maybe the last 4 years in a row. So I do feel like, week one they have in the bag, especially against the Ravens, who they've won, I think, 6 out of the last 7 games against. Yeah. And then also, the hype of week one being at home.
Yeah, and that's a crazy statement to think about, that Andy Dalton and AJ Green have never opened the season at home. I mean, that's just – I mean, I know they're not super long in the tooth, but I mean, they've been on the team for a while. That's crazy to think about. I tend to agree with you. The Bengals tend to play, even though it can get ugly at times. Sometimes it's a big shootout where it's crazy plays, the Hail Marys at the end. And I remember it was the 2015 season. I think it was week 2 or 3, that crazy game that went back and forth, and the Bengals pulled it off. I always write, expect the unexpected when the Bengals and Ravens play, because some weird stuff happens. But nevertheless, I tend to agree with you. I think that's a win for the team. And I do think, that they, pull it off. Now, this is where already week 2, we're already talking about some where the schedule gets really funky. 5 days later, they take on the Texans. They are at home, but they take on the Texans, a team that they have struggled mightily against. In basically since Andy Dalton's been there. I think he's got like a 1-5 record against them, or something of that nature. Yeah. And it's coming off a short week against a division, the probably a hard-fought physical game against a division rival. Then you're going up against another great defense. Does this one concern you?
There are definite reasons to be concerned, but I feel like the beginning of the season is going to be the best time to play the Texans this year, because their quarterback situation is so uncertain. They're going to be starting out with a new quarterback. How is he going to do? Is the rookie going to play? So I feel like if there's a time to play the Texans, it's maybe, the beginning of the season coming off a short week. But then again, like last year, Carson Wentz, won the first 5 games in a row that he played, which was largely because, NFL teams just didn't know how to prepare for him as a new starter. So there's always throwing that kind of thing into the equation too. And the Bengals really have not done well against the Texans at all during Andy Dalton's time in Cincinnati. So there's definite reason to be concerned, but I still think that this has to be a win.
I'm pulled in 2 completely different directions here. And I totally agree with your statement on this is a great time to play him. Great time to play him because of the quarterback situation, and they'll be figuring stuff out. And usually, if I remember correctly, Houston's a team that really starts to build steam as the middle and end of the season comes around. And ironically, I think the only win Andy Dalton has had against the Texans was in Houston. I believe it was in 2014. So, that's kind of an odd one. I guess, oh boy, I don't know what to take on this one. I'll say a loss. So I got him at 1-1. You got him at 2-0. Then, oh boy, then they go to, a week and a half later, they go to Green Bay and play the Packers. And, this one's interesting. I actually might. There's a chance I might actually attend this game.
Me too. I'm going to try really hard.
We got to link up if we got to link up if we do. That's my birthday, by the way, the 24th.
Oh,
so
nice.
yeah. So anyway, very interesting game, iconic field. The Bengals have actually done relatively well against Aaron Rodgers when he's been the quarterback. I believe they got a win against him in, I think it was 2009, and then again in
2014.
Yeah. And that one was a wacky one at Paul Brown Stadium. So this one is in Green Bay. Now, Green Bay is very similar to the Bengals in the fact that they don't really do a ton in free agency. They build through the draft. Some people haven't really dug totally what they've done this offseason, but again, Aaron Rodgers, home field. I I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. I think one of the only major things that I can think of that the Bengals have in their corner here, not only their history against Aaron Rodgers and beating him, but the fact that they've got that kind of mini bye off of the Thursday night game. What do you think of this one?
I am going to say that this is a loss, but I do think that playing in Green Bay in September is ideal if you're going to play in Green Bay. Less cold than it could be, which is why I'm interested in going. And also, someone asked in the comments earlier what the best road games are going to be this year. And even though I'm going to say that I predict this to be a loss, I do think that this is going to be the best road game because I've heard amazing things about going to games in Green Bay. I've heard like the fans are the most welcoming fans in the NFL, and that is just an amazing atmosphere. I really want to be there. And I mean, we can hope for a win, but I am going to say that this is going to be a loss as of now.
Yeah, I'm not saying, blowout or anything of that nature. Maybe this is a last minute field goal, but I do see it being a hard fought game, but and one that the Bengals could potentially win. But I don't know. That's just a tough call. You got to hope for a lot of things to fall your way and play. The Bengals will need to play pretty impeccable football in order to come out of there with a win. Not saying they can't, but the likelihood is probably favoring the Packers in that one. I get the feeling we'll probably agree at the next one. They're at Cleveland. Cleveland has either shown to be very scrappy against the Bengals or complete doormats. More so the latter in recent years, but I chalk this one up as them getting kind of right back on track and a good follow-up game to a very tough one against Green Bay. What do you think?
Yes, I'm going to agree. I think that the Browns have a chance to be better this year, and they have to be better this year than they were last year, but I think that it's going to take some time. So I think that, again, playing them earlier in the year is going to be less difficult than playing them later in the year.
Yeah, so you got them at 3-1, and I have them at 2-2 so far. Week later, they are home with the Bills, a team that every time I see that team on the Bengals schedule, I don't know about you, I'm just like, that team just bugs me because the Bengals either play really well but somehow find a way to lose, or it's just one of those low-scoring games that's like 16-13 or – it's just one of those frustrating games that seems to, and they always seem to play them, even though they're not in the same division, which is weird. But what do you think about this one? But Buffalo goes to Paul Brown Stadium, October 8th, Week 5.
I do not have high hopes for Buffalo this year. I just don't see it working out for them. I think they're not even going to get Macklin. He left there today after all their players tried to claim, oh, he's ours. He's already signed. We're signing players every day. Like, no, you're not. He's not coming to you. I think he actually is going to go to the Ravens, where he is right now. And I think that this should be a win. I think they also have a lot of quarterback questions. They have a new entire coaching staff and GMs and scouts. Like, literally the entire front office is turned over. Sounds like chaos there. I think the Bengals have this.
I tend to agree. I don't think it'll be the most fun game to watch is kind of what I was talking about earlier. I don't know. Every time they play the Bills, I just get frustrated with that game for some reason. But it's at home. The Bills have lost a couple of guys, as you have mentioned. They have added players, but in the midst of transition and all of that. So I think the Bengals get that there. You have them at 4-1. I have them at 3-2. And I hope I don't butcher this name in the YouTube chat. Amunkalikis has Week 4 Browns. The Bengals go 4-0, and they beat them 34-18. And then Week 5, he's got them 5-0, 28-17. So he's got them off to a pretty hot start there. Then the Bengals have the bye week, and there's not really much to talk about with a bye week, but I do want to ask you this. Are you favoring the fact that the bye week is earlier in the season? Do you wish it was later? Because after they've got a pretty decently tough stretch of games, and a bunch in a row, obviously. So, do you have any reservations about it being so early in the season?
I think it's okay. I mean, week 6, it could be worse. It could be week 4,
Yeah.
which it was a few years ago. But I'm more concerned about the bye week being before the Steelers, because the Steelers are next, and the Bengals do not play well when coming off a bye. I think it's like an absurdly bad record that they've had for the last 6 years of coming off the bye. So I don't really mind the week 6 bye, but I mind the week 6 bye followed by week 7 Steelers.
Okay. And I love that you brought up the bye week thing, because that you're playing right into my points, Rebecca. I love it. I love it. Marvin Lewis is I talked about my concerns with Marvin Lewis. He's not good off the bye. And then I gave the Bengals a loss against the Texans. Marvin Lewis is not good in prime time, whether you believe in that or not. Those are two areas where and two critical areas that a coach should be capable in. And Marvin Lewis has proved not to be so. And then after the bye, like you mentioned, it's not only do they play the Steelers, they go to Pittsburgh to play the Steelers. And ironically, I mean, the Bengals have fewer than double-digit wins against Pittsburgh in Marvin Lewis's now 15 years as head coach, which is staggering. I think they have 6 or 7 wins against him or something like that. But
and then 3 of them are they've won 3 times in Pittsburgh, maybe 2. It's terrible. It's not going to be good.
Yeah, I don't understand that one. But so what it's not terrible weather at this point. I mean, it's mid to late October. It's not terrible weather at this point in Pittsburgh. But one of the things that does play into effect anytime you play at Heinz Field is the kicking game. Because the field is usually torn up. Kickers always complain about that field. So two good defenses, a lot of explosive weapons also for both teams. Going to be interesting to see. It's going to be interesting to see if Joe Mixon is getting a lot of carries in. A lot of comparisons of Joe Mixon actually go to Le'Veon Bell, which is also interesting. But I have this as an L. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I mean, the probability just is not in the Bengals' favor to say that they can win.
Yeah. So I think we're in agreement there. Then they play the Colts in a very interesting game, and it's at home. The Colts tend to play better, obviously, in their dome at home, and they also are a streaky team. And anytime Andrew Luck is in there, he's kind of the comeback kid. He's got a lot of comeback wins in his career. The Bengals, whether it was Peyton Manning or Andrew Luck, have not really had great luck, I guess, for lack of better words, against the Colts. So this one's a coin flip one for me. What about you?
I do see this as a win. I feel like the Colts are trying. Last season was not a good one for them. They're trying to get back to where they should be with Andrew Luck as their quarterback. But I think that at home, the Bengals can win this. And they're probably going to be in a bit of must-win mode, even though it's super early to say that. But after coming off the Steelers, if that's a loss, I feel like they're really going to be pumped up to win. And I do feel like that's a winnable game for them.
Yeah, and it's a stretch of games where – your first, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 of your first 12 games are against AFC opponents, which, obviously the Bengals are going to play more AFC opponents anyway. But, when you're, like you said, with so many AFC opponents in how that playoff picture plays out, they're going to need to make some waves there. I'll give them a win here. I'm not totally definitive on that, but I think home field, they'll probably play a little angry after the Steelers game and may take it out on Indianapolis. So you have them at 4-2.
Is it
5-2?
Yeah, 5-2.
5-2, and I think I have them at 4-3.
Yeah.
Next one at Jacksonville. This team's kind of a mess. I tend to think this one's, even though it's in Jacksonville, I tend to think it should be a game that the Bengals walk away with probably a double-digit point win. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I do think that the Jaguars are going to improve this year. I feel like everyone says that every year, but they should improve this year, and their running game will be pretty scary. But I think that this should be another win for the Bengals. It really needs to be.
Yeah, I agree.
As one of the easier games.
This one scares me a little bit. This next one. They play the Titans in Tennessee, so they're back to back playing AFC South teams on their home turf, and the Titans, I believe, went 9-7 last year and were pushing for the playoffs. They showed some good strides. Marcus Mariota played very good football. Yeah. Bengals tend to struggle a little bit with those mobile quarterbacks, guys who run the read option, guys who can move around a little bit, who can ad-lib and throw the ball downfield, which Mariota and the Titans can do. They've got the two-headed running attack of Derrick Henry and DeMarco Murray. I think this might be a loss for them. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that the Titans are going to be very good this year. I think that this is definitely going to be a tough game. And this is also another game that I am interested in going to. I think that Tennessee,
really?
Yeah, I think that it would be really fun to go, but not so much if it's a loss. But I am interested in going to this one too. But I don't have too high of hopes for their outcome.
Man, nothing would be worse than going to two Bengals games on the road and they lose both. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's going to be a tough one. I think that's going to be a tough one. And if you do go to that game, I hear Nashville is a very fun city, so have some fun if you do go there. And then this is kind of even though the Jaguars are maybe a weaker team, Titans, could very well be a playoff team or could regress a little bit. And then they play the Broncos. There's 3 road games in a row right there, which is very tough. This one's a little later in the day. It's not a primetime game. It might be on kind of quote unquote national TV, but they're at Denver, a team that they haven't always played great against, but they have won some big games against Denver in the past. Denver has a lot of talent at a lot of different spots, but they are another team that is still trying to figure out quarterback. If Trevor Siemian's the guy, Trevor Siemian tore the Bengals up last year, but in a game I was at, yay. But he really struggled down the stretch, and he didn't put up a ton of stats. That was obviously his biggest game of the season, and I don't think Denver even really knows what to make of their quarterback position at this point. I mean, I think they're probably committed to him at the moment, but who knows when, if they will be when Week 11 rolls around. I actually think they might take this one. What about you?
Yeah, I am with you, especially with a first-year head coach, even though that head coach is Vance Joseph, who was with the Bengals just 2 years ago as their secondary coach. So he obviously knows the team very well. But the Bengals are actually at a point now where they're playing their former coaches so often that they are getting used to how to deal with that. So I know last year they ended up having to change some hand signals because they were playing Hugh Jackson and then who was the other one that they – and Jay Gruden in back-to-back weeks. And so this year we're going to get there, but they're also playing the Vikings. So that's going to be another 2 former coaches who they're going to have to figure out how to maneuver around and not, have it so obvious what they're doing. But I do see this as a win.
That's a great point. And I think a lot of people, especially last season when the Bengals struggled, a lot of people were fans were at least talking about Vance Joseph as being a guy, maybe we should bring him back as a possible head coach replacement, all of that. Obviously he's been a hot name for the past couple of years. He was a secondary coach with the Bengals, went to defensive coordinator with Miami, and then got promoted to head coach of Denver. And a lot of people think that's a good hire. I just think they still just might have some offensive growing pains just because of the quarterback position. Then the Bengals host the Browns. I think this is a win, but I'm gonna say this. I do think the Browns are heading in the right direction. I think they still need to figure out, obviously, the quarterback position. Maybe we'll see Deshaun Kaiser at this point. At this point in the season, if they're still trying to figure things out. But and they're losing a lot of games. But I do like the talent they've amassed. And I've said to people that I don't think this year will be a great one. They may be a 5-6 win team or something like that, but I think they'll be really scrappy in 2018, especially if they start figuring out the quarterback position. I still think the Bengals sweep the Browns, but we've thought that the Bengals would beat certain teams before, and they've kind of laid an egg. Do you see them sweeping this series this year again?
I do, but like I said before, I think the time to play them easy is going to be the beginning of the year. So I do expect that this game, even though this one is the one at home, is going to be the much tougher and more competitive contest, which actually kind of would be refreshing to see at this point. I mean, it's like I almost wonder, like, should we be rooting for them to have like some semblance of success just to make it more competitive? So I mean, no, but like I would enjoy it, being a real game instead of just like a blowout, which it has often been. So I do think they're going to win, but I think it'll be more fun to watch than some of the last few Bengals-Browns games.
Yeah, never forget that 2014 game when the Browns were really scrappy that year, and they came in and just really took it to the Bengals. Obviously, the Bengals were banged up at that point, but it was on Thursday Night Football, and that was a miserable game to watch. The one thing that's a little scary about that game is it's sandwiched not only between 3 away games, but it's also on the other side is a home game on primetime television against the Steelers. So, you'd like to think that the Bengals don't overlook the Browns, especially if they're struggling at that point, but kind of a little bit more tricky than people are giving them credit for. So I have them at this point, I believe, at 7-4, I believe I counted. So that puts you at 8-3, correct?
Yes, I believe that's right.
Okay, so this one
sounds like we're due for another loss.
This one is Bengals host the Steelers on Monday Night Football on ESPN. Could say a lot about the division. Could say a lot about the overall AFC playoff picture, especially if these hopes we have for the Bengals are truly coming to fruition this year. I want with all of my heart to say win here. I do. And I think one of the last times the Bengals hosted the Steelers on Monday Night Football, the Bengals won. Yeah. But yeah, I think it was 2014 maybe. Obviously other primetime games, they've absolutely imploded. But I want with all my heart to say win here. I don't know if I see it. What's your gut telling you here, Rebecca?
Yeah, I so desperately would love to say that I see this as a win, and I really hope that I'm proven wrong. I mean, I hope I'm proven wrong on every loss, but especially losses to the Steelers. But I just don't feel like we can really say that the Bengals can beat the Steelers as of now, especially in prime time. I mean, maybe, like, who knows if Ben Roethlisberger can make it through the whole season. Like, he's been injured essentially every year for the last 3 years. So you never know if that happens. But as of today, with everyone healthy, I am going to say this is a loss.
Captain Milken injury, right? That guy. Oh, my gosh. I'm seeing, a lot of predictions for previous games. I'm really curious to see what the listeners think about this one. Yeah, it's definitely possible. It's definitely possible. I mean, the Steelers aren't unbeatable, but I think December is usually Pittsburgh's time, and especially if they are relatively healthy and are in the playoff picture. They just have that killer instinct, and unfortunately, the Bengals haven't always shown that under Marvin Lewis. And even if the Steelers are hovering around 500 at the time, and they have a shot at the playoffs, and they know that a big win against the Bengals would help propel them to do that, they're going to play them tough. And unfortunately, a lot of Steelers fans will be in attendance at Paul Brown Stadium because they are fair weather fan base travelers. That's what they are. So, okay. So you have 8-4. Was it 8-4? And I have 7-5, I think, after that one.
Yeah.
Then it could be Mitchell Trubisky time. The Bengals host the Bears. I think they absolutely throttle Chicago. I think Chicago is kind of a mess. Maybe a little better than they were last year, but still not a good team in my opinion. I think this should be a win. What about you?
I am in total agreement. This has to be a win. It's going to get more tough again as we get down from here. It's going to be coming from a tough stretch. So yes, this needs to be a win. I think the Bears are still in chaos, and maybe I'm not even confident they'll be better this year than they were last year.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you could be right. Oh man. Yeah. That team, that's kind of a mess of a situation. As you mentioned earlier, very interesting one in week 15. The Minnesota Vikings host the Bengals, and Mike Zimmer hosts his old buddy, Marvin Lewis. I think they faced off in preseason last year. Vikings are, and again, another one of those teams that has a lot of talent in a lot of places. Unfortunately, their quarterback situation is a little bit in flux. And I say unfortunately because of what happened to Teddy Bridgewater, and he seems like a really stand-up guy, and I don't wish that kind of thing to happen, that big injury that happened last training camp on anybody, especially a good guy like him. But I don't know that he's going to be ready to play immediately. Some people think he might not even play this year. So it's going to be interesting to see if it's him or Sam Bradford under center. This should be a brawl. Another coin flip one for me. What about you?
Yeah, I think that this is going to be a really tough one. I also am in agreement about Teddy Bridgewater. I really like him. What happened last year was terrible. And I did see that. I think he's been cleared to run left to right. So he's making some progress, but I don't know that he's going to be playing this year. So we'll see on that. And if he's not, then Sam Bradford kind of fell apart in the end of last year after they started the season 8-0. But I do think that the Vikings are going to be very good this year, and this game will be very tough. I think I'm going to say that this is a loss.
Okay. I'll take a win on this one, believe it or not. And I guess I'm seeing Sam Bradford kind of do the dink and dunk thing, and the Bengals players that they have in the secondary, in the middle of the defense, really taking advantage, maybe jumping routes, that sort of thing. They added, I believe they added Latavius Murray, the running back of Oakland, who that's going to be kind of interesting to see how that transition takes place from Adrian Peterson. But I don't know. I see that dink and dunk offense not really working well against that aggressive Bengals defense. I think they'll make some plays, and at this point, as we talked about earlier in the show, at this point we'll probably also get the Bengals offensive line. We'll get a good picture as to how they are at this point in the season and how they're doing, how those young guys are doing, because the Vikings can get after the passer, as can the Steelers and other teams on the schedule. But at this point, we should have a pretty good grasp on how that offensive line is looking. Another interesting one, the Bengals host the Lions, a team. Did they make the playoffs last year or just miss?
Yeah. They made it and then lost in the first round.
That's right. First round, yeah. Again, a team with a lot of talent and familiar face. Marvin Jones, a fan favorite, is now with Detroit. I tend to think the Lions can't really seem to keep, in terms of season to season, can't seem to keep any semblance of consistency, and that's really ironic coming from a guy who talks about the Bengals. But I just, I don't see them being a team that, consistently is in the playoff picture 3-4 years straight. I think they might go maybe 8-8-ish. So I think the Bengals might take this one, especially because it's at home. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think that the Lions are definitely going to regress from last year. I don't see them staying as consistent as they were last year, but we will see. And I think that this should be a win.
Okay. And then the Bengals close out the season at Baltimore, as seems to be almost a yearly tradition, not necessarily in Baltimore, but they seem to play the Ravens, end the season with the Ravens almost every single year. It's sometimes it's a meaningless game like last year where a lot of guys are injured and both teams are kind of out of the playoff race. Sometimes it's both teams that are going to the postseason. Sometimes it's one team that is kind of doing a gear-up game while going into the postseason. I don't personally see the Ravens as a playoff team this year. I guess given our records, I guess I see the Bengals looking as such, but I still think this is a loss, whether it's the Bengals resting guys or whether it's, Baltimore kind of just taking a home game away from the Bengals and another win from the Bengals. What do you think?
Two things. One is that if you just saw my face, it was because I was turning my head to the NBA Finals, where I think LeBron James just got a concussion and was down on the floor for like a very long time. So that was
breaking news on the Orange and Black Insider. I love it. Yeah. I saw your face. I was like, do I got something on me? Breaking news. LeBron James has potentially an injury in the NBA Finals in Game 3.
So that was that. And then back to the actual, podcast here. I think that this is going to be a win because I really think that this could be the Bengals' make or break into the playoffs game. So I don't know what I have them at this point, but I assume that I'm pretty close to either like making the playoffs or not based on the outcome of this game. And I think that that's like what a lot of predictions have going right now is that the season really could come down to who wins this game, and maybe the person who wins it is in and the person who loses it is out. So I think that same thing, like playing well against the Ravens is necessary, but the Bengals have closed at home for like the last 6 seasons in a row for all those years that they opened on the road. So it'll be a change of scenery for them in the final week of the season.
So I believe, you had a win for this one, correct?
Yes, I'm giving them a win.
Okay, so I think if I'm counting correctly, I think you had them at 11-5. You had Ravens win, Texans win, Browns win, Bills win,
okay.
Colts win, Jaguars win, Broncos win, Browns win, Bears win, Vikings you had
loss.
Lions win.
11-5, yeah.
Yeah, 11-5, and I think I had them at 10-6.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, when we look at what you and I said at the beginning of this segment, we had them maybe around that 9-win range, and now we're looking at, based on re-looking at the schedule, we're looking at probably a 1 to 2 game positive difference for the Bengals because of the additions. Does that sound pretty fair to you?
Yeah, I think it does. I think that the Bengals are on paper better today than they were at the end of last season with all these rookie additions, though it really hinges on them actually playing the rookies. So like, I feel like every offseason we get so excited about these rookies and all the potential, and then they don't play. So I do think that this year really is going to be different in that the rookies largely are going to play. Like, I think Mixon is going to be a heavy contributor. Ross is going to be a heavy contributor. And then the Jordan Willis and Carl Lawson both should be very heavily used in a rotation. Neither of them is going to start, in my opinion, but they are going to see the field. Right. And so I think that if these guys actually play, which they should, if their projections turn out accurate, then the Bengals really should be better this year than they were last year.
I agree, and I agree especially with those 4 rookies you mentioned. And we talked about Marvin Lewis and his contract earlier. Maybe that plays into it. Maybe he's kind of like, I'm going to push the chips to the center of the table, and these are exciting guys. We drafted them for a reason, and if he really wants to stay in Cincinnati and coach for another contract, he's going to have to play some of these young, talented guys. And hopefully that the potential and the upside matches the production if they do get the extensive time that we hope for. Good stuff, Rebecca. Appreciate your insight. What listeners, what do you think the Bengals are going to do in terms of record? Take a look at the schedule. Listen to what how we broke down the schedule and make your own predictions. I see a couple of people that have the Bengals in the YouTube chat winning quite a few games, maybe even more so than the 10 and 11 that Rebecca and I had for Cincinnati, which would be interesting if the Bengals can rebound that nicely and maybe even double their win total from the year prior. That would be a very nice welcome surprise. You can catch this show, as I mentioned earlier. You can catch this show on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes. It's on Cincy Jungle, so check out all of the content there. You can get in touch with us via email, theobinsider@gmail.com. We're on Twitter at BengalsOBI. Rebecca is on Twitter at Rebecca_Toback. Is that correct?
It is.
Okay, and I'm at CJ Anthony CY, so get in touch with us, get in touch with the show. We appreciate all the support you guys have shown us so far. Last chance to get your questions in. There were a couple I saw earlier, Rebecca. I'm going to try and scroll through them. We did catch a couple of them. Nick Mark said, well, you talked about the best away games to go to, Rebecca. What do you think, now that we look through the schedule? Nick Marks asks, what's the best home game to catch this year based on the schedule?
Well, I mean, I just encourage everyone who can to go to the Steelers game. I mean, like every year, there's like so many Steelers fans there, and it's embarrassing. I mean, it should be embarrassing for Bengals fans to see that many Steelers fans in your stadium. Like, we need to be the ones filling up the seats there. If I lived in Cincinnati, I most definitely would be there. Maybe I'll still be there, but I encourage everyone to go to that game. But otherwise, as far as like maybe the best actual game to go to, I feel like actually a lot of the good games are the ones on the road, like the Vikings and Titans and Packers. Maybe the Steelers game really is the best one to go to.
Yeah. I think in terms of atmosphere and energy, that Monday night game, like you mentioned, against the Steelers, there's nothing like it. Unfortunately, there's going to be jerks in the stands for both from both fan bases. There's a lot of contention between the fan bases. So if you do go, don't be a jerk. But that, in terms of energy, I would totally agree with you. If you're going to the stadium and wanting to expect a win, that might not be the best game to go to. I think if you're looking for maybe fun and points and potentially a Bengals win, I think their hosting of Indianapolis and Detroit could also be very fun games. And though they play the Colts somewhat often, it's not an every year thing. They play them every preseason because they're so close in proximity. But they do play Detroit often in the preseason as well because of their proximity. But they don't get to – the Lions don't come to PBS that often. So those might be some fun games with a lot of offensive explosion in those games. That might be some good ones as well. Good question from Nick.
I saw another about
Shields. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know who it was from, though, so maybe this is the same one you're looking at. But I saw someone was asking if we think Eifert is going to get extended before the season.
Exactly, yep. That's where I was going. Yep.
Okay, great. So, I do think that either Eifert or Burfict, maybe both, will get extended before the season. I think that those are the two players to be watching for as guys with potentials to get extended this offseason. And typically it's around this time, kind of when the Bengals break, because like next week is mini camp, then they're gone until training camp. So there's about a month there where the team is just kind of hanging out. And I think that time from, kind of the end of next week to the end of July is when we can hope to see someone extended. So Eifert, Burfict, I would say that Burfict is more likely to be extended this offseason than Eifert because the team has so much power with Eifert if they want to franchise tag him next year. If they were to do that, he would get like $9 million, which is like just about what he would probably get on a new deal, if not less. So it really might be in their favor to just franchise tag him next year. But Burfict, I think, is more
I'm glad that was one I really wanted to ask you about to get your insight on, because I think that's a really interesting question, because Marvin Lewis loves, he's got his favorite players. He's got certain guys he really respects. And still, one of the things he gets down on players about is their lack of availability. Now, injuries happen, especially severe ones. You can't help it. And obviously he doesn't berate anybody for having it. But when they're kind of nicked up and they miss some extra time, he airs some dirty laundry in that respect. But I mean, you look at Eifert's career, missed a game in his rookie year, and he was taking a backseat to Jermaine Gresham that year. 2014 missed essentially 16 games with that elbow injury that he had. 2015, when he had his real breakout year, 13 touchdowns, he still missed 3 games because of an injury. Going back, I said 2014. Going back, he missed essentially 16 games. It's actually essentially 17 games because he didn't play in the playoffs that year. And then last year he missed another 8. So, I mean, he's missing almost as much time as he is seeing the field. So, I think the Bengals want to extend him.
Yeah.
But I think they're going to need to get really creative with the contract. It's going to have to be incentive-based, workout bonuses, playing time, all that kind of stuff, because when he's on the field, he's a monster.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of the fact that he's not on the field, and he's not on the field that often. I mean, when he's out there, especially the last couple of seasons, he's almost essentially, you look at 2015 and 2016, he has 18 touchdowns in 21 games played. Right. I mean, he's almost a touchdown a game type of guy. So, and then you throw him in now with Ross and Green and Boyd and Mixon, and I mean, if they have all of those weapons, they're a great offense, and he's definitely a big part of that. I think they want to extend him. I think they might. Like you said, these summer months are usually when they start doing these things, especially in these guys in their last year, their deals and that sort of thing. That's usually when they get these types of things done. And he might be one of those guys. I think it's going to have to be a creative type of contract for him if they're going to extend him. I appreciate the questions tonight, guys. We're going to get out of here. We're a little short on time. Rebecca, what we've done, my co-hosts, Connor Howe and Scott Schulze, who also contribute to Cincy Jungle and other various areas, what we've kind of talked about the last couple of weeks is maybe and this is totally non-Bengals related, so you can take off your Bengals cap for a minute, a TV show and a movie that you want to recommend to the listeners, either one that's an old one that you rewatched and hey, this is a great movie, or an old TV show you binge watched, a new one, maybe one that hasn't been heard of. I've been recommending the last couple of weeks. I've been recommending a very weird show, the new reboot of Twin Peaks on Showtime, and I saw Waldo in the chat room said it was a good recommendation, so I'm glad you like it. Definitely a quirky and weird show. What can you recommend to some of our listeners in terms of a show that they need to start watching, rewatching, and a movie that they maybe need to go see?
Well, I'm laughing because I'm literally the worst person to ask that to, which, I mean, you can maybe imagine because I literally work 24/7, but I do not watch any movies, and I watch very terrible girl television. So this is when I'm not watching sports, which is essentially what I'm watching 90% of the time. I'm watching horrible reality TV that I really don't even want to tell you about. I don't think you can take any of my recommendations when it comes to television or movies.
Well, that's okay. Sometimes trash TV, and sometimes the guilty pleasures. My wife has started to watch a couple of shows where I'm like, oh, why are you watching that? And then all of a sudden, I'll be doing stuff around the house or go run some errands, go to the gym, whatever, come back, and she might still be watching them with the little one. And I'm like, why are you still watching this? And I kind of sit down and hang with them. And I catch myself watching like 3 episodes in a row, and I'm like, what am I doing? So there's nothing wrong with it. The guilty pleasures in life are sometimes the best ones. So check out some reality TV stuff per Rebecca Toback, listeners.
Yes, I will say the one acceptable reality TV show, and it's bordering unacceptable. But on Bravo Below Deck, and they're in Croatia right now, so it's pretty cool to see them. They like live on a yacht, and they cater to like billionaires on the yacht, and it's very entertaining. And
that'd be kind of cool. Yeah, that'd be kind of cool.
I mean, but really,
especially
you should
if you got that yeah, especially for those of us that have that champagne taste, beer budget type of thing. You know what I mean? You can really get into it.
Imagine.
Well, yeah, Rebecca, thanks so much for jumping in tonight. We'll have you on again soon if your schedule permits. I know you're a very busy woman, and thanks for everything that you do for Cincy Jungle and for supporting this program. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. That was fun.
Absolutely. Again, this has been the Orange and Black Insider. Rebecca Toback, from the site manager from Cincy Jungle, joined us. I'm Anthony Cosenza. You catch the show. I've said it a couple times, but please do. YouTube, iTunes, SoundCloud. We're on Cincy Jungle. Get in touch with us on Twitter. We love to hear from you. We love all the support we've received from the listeners and all of the live viewers that we've received especially over the past handful of months. We've received quite a few. So keep logging in, and we'll keep bringing you content. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next episode.